The stranger's kindness. The twin suns of Arcaris burned low in the sky, painting the city market in shades of gold and red. Merchants shouted in deep voices, trying to sell fruits, cloth, and strange shining metals. The air smelled of roasted grain and sharp spices. Among the crowd walked a human. He was tall, wrapped in a travel cloak, and carried a small bag on his back. His face showed weariness from long journeys, but his eyes were calm. Most of the aliens ignored him. Some stared for a moment, then quickly looked away. Humans were rare here, and strangers were never trusted for long. The human stopped when he noticed something. Near a stall of clay pots, a small alien child struggled to walk. The child's skin was pale blue, its head crowned with soft ridges like the crest of a bird. But the child's leg was bent and weak. Each step was painful. The child leaned on the wall, trying not to fall. Some shoppers glanced, but none stopped. A few turned their heads away. The human frowned. He could see the shame in the child's eyes, the way it bit its lip to hide the pain. The boy was too young to suffer alone. The human crouched down, watching quietly. The child tried to carry a small basket, but it slipped from his hand. The fruit rolled across the dirt road. People walked past, pretending not to see. The human stepped forward. He bent down, picked up the fruit, and handed it back to the child. The child froze, staring up at him with wide, silver eyes. You help me?" the boy whispered in a trembling voice. The human smiled softly. "Of course. You shouldn't carry this alone." He placed the fruit back into the basket and looked at the twisted leg. The child wobbled and nearly fell. Without thinking, the human caught him by the arm and held him steady. Around them, the market quieted. A few aliens paused. Their eyes narrowed. Some whispered to each other. But the human didn't notice. His mind was on the boy. The human pulled a small knife from his bag and gathered a broken wooden crate from the ground. With quick hands, he cut a length of wood, shaping it roughly. Then he found a strip of cloth and wrapped it tightly. The merchants around him stared in silence, confused by his work. The child tilted his head. "What are you doing?" The human's smile widened. "Making something to help you walk." He carved, tied, and shaped until the wood resembled a simple crutch. It was rough, not perfect, but strong enough. He handed it to the child. "Here, try this." The boy's hand shook as he touched it. He placed the crutch under his arm and leaned forward. For the first time, his weight lifted from the weak leg. He stood straighter. His eyes widened with surprise. He took a step. Then another. His lips parted in joy. "I can walk. I can walk." The boy laughed, a sound so pure that even the hard-faced merchants turned their heads. He hopped forward, testing the crutch, then spun back toward the human. His silver eyes glowed. "Thank you. Thank you, stranger." The human chuckled. "Be careful. It's only wood and cloth, but it will carry you." The child nodded again and again, as if the gift were the greatest treasure in the world. But while the boy laughed, the whispers in the market grew louder. "Did you see what he did?" hissed one alien woman. "He touched the broken," muttered a man. "He gave aid." "That is forbidden." An elder shook his head gravely. "The Emperor will hear of this. Mercy is not allowed." The human finally noticed the stares. Faces had turned cold. Eyes followed him with suspicion, even fear. He did not understand. Why would kindness be a crime? He looked down at the child, who was still smiling, clutching the crutch as if it were part of his body now. The human knelt beside him. "You'll be all right now." But the child's smile faded slightly. His voice dropped to a whisper. You should leave. They don't like what you did." The human frowned. "Why not? I only helped." The child shook his head, but before he could answer, a merchant shouted loudly, "Guards! Guards, come quickly!" The human's heart tightened. Around him, the market that had been full of colors and voices now felt heavy with silence. Even the sun seemed dimmer. Somewhere in the distance, armored footsteps echoed. The boy clutched the crutch tighter, fear in his eyes. "Run," he whispered. "Please, stranger, run." The human stood tall, his cloak shifting in the wind. His jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed calm. He did not know the law of this world, but he could already feel its cruelty pressing down on him. And above it all, he felt the weight of a single act, a simple kindness, that might soon cost him more than he had ever expected. The footsteps grew closer. The parting crowd cleared a path, and the human knew this was only the beginning. Whispers in the market. The boy's laughter still echoed faintly, but the market had changed. Where once there was noise and trade, now there was silence. Every eye followed the human. Every whisper clung to the air like smoke. The child leaned proudly on his new crutch, taking careful steps, but his joy seemed to fade as he noticed the way people stared. The human could feel it too, the weight of suspicion pressing down. An old merchant with gray skin and cracked horns spat onto the ground. "Foolish outworlder," he muttered. "Doesn't know the law, doesn't know the cost," another voice hissed. "Helping the broken, he dares. Mercy is forbidden here." The human's brows furrowed. He looked around at the crowd. Their eyes were not filled with gratitude, but with fear. Some covered their mouths, afraid to speak louder. Others pointed at him with trembling fingers. He leaned closer to the boy. "Why are they whispering like that? What law did I break?" The boy lowered his eyes. His hand shook as it clutched the crutch. He opened his mouth, but before he could answer, the sound of boots echoed at the far end of the market. The guards had arrived, clad in dark armor, their helmets shaped like snarling beasts. 3 soldiers pushed their way through the crowd. Each carried a long staff tipped with a glowing spear of energy. Their eyes glowed faintly from under their helmets. The people parted quickly, bowing their heads. No one wanted the soldier's gaze. The human felt his jaw tighten. He had seen war, seen cruelty, but this was something different. Here the people bowed not from respect, but from terror. One guard raised his voice sharp and commanding. A report was made. "Someone has broken the Emperor's law. Step forward, human!" The crowd shifted, dozens of eyes flicking toward him. The whispers turned into an urgent murmur. "Don't stand still. Run." "No, if he runs, they'll kill him on sight." The boy clutched at the human's cloak. "Please don't speak. Don't fight them." But the human stood tall, his expression calm. He spoke evenly, his voice carrying in the heavy air. "What law have I broken? Tell me." The guards laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Ignorance is no shield, off-worlder. You gave aid to one who was meant to crawl. You lifted the weak. That is rebellion." The crowd shivered at the words. Rebellion. A word so heavy it felt like a curse. The boy looked down, his small shoulders shaking. His voice was barely a whisper. "I told you. Helping me is forbidden." The human's eyes softened, but anger stirred beneath. "How can kindness be a crime?" The lead guard slammed the butt of his spear into the ground. Sparks shot out, crackling in the dirt. "By order of the Emperor, you are under arrest. Surrender or be struck down." The crowd gasped, but no one moved. No one dared to intervene. For a moment, the human considered his choices. His eyes scanned the street. 3 soldiers, armed and trained. A crowd too afraid to help. And beside him, a fragile child whose life might be destroyed if he resisted. So instead of reaching for a weapon, the human raised his hands slowly. "I meant no harm," he said, his voice steady. "I only helped a child," the guard sneered. "And that is harm enough." They stepped forward, but just then something strange happened. A voice rose from the crowd, trembling but loud. "He only gave a crutch. That is all. Why punish him?" Heads turned. It was a woman with scales along her cheeks, her eyes blazing with courage. She quickly lowered her gaze, as if realizing her mistake, but the words had already been spoken. The guards froze for a moment. Then another voice, low and uncertain, joined. "Yes, he showed mercy. Is that not good?" The whispers spread like sparks in dry grass. Dozens of murmurs rippled through the market. "Why is it a crime? He only helped." The guards spun, their glowing eyes scanning the crowd. Silence fell again as quickly as it had risen. Fear choked the voices. But the human saw something else, something new. Beneath the fear, a small light of defiance. The lead guard growled. "Enough! Take him." They moved forward, grabbing the human roughly by the arms. The boy cried out, "No! Please don't hurt him." One guard shoved the child aside. He stumbled but managed to stay upright on the crutch. His eyes filled with tears, but also with something brighter. Anger. The human was dragged through the crowd. No one moved to stop the soldiers, yet many eyes followed him, wide and questioning. Some of them, for the first time, looked not at the Emperor's law, but at the man who had broken it. The boy limped after them as far as he could, calling out, "Stranger." "Don't give up." His small voice cracked, but it carried through the marketplace. The human turned his head just slightly, catching the boy's eyes. He gave the faintest smile even as the soldiers forced him forward, and the whispers returned. Louder this time. Not all whispers of fear, some whispers of wonder. He helped the broken. He defied the Emperor. Could he be the start of something? The guards marched away, but the market would never be the same. The Emperor's command the city of Arcaris was restless. By morning, rumors had spread like wildfire. A human stranger had defied the law. He had touched the broken, raised the weak, given mercy where none was allowed. In the taverns, whispers grew. He made a crutch for a lame child. They say he smiled as if it was nothing. Is he brave? Or foolish? The soldiers carried the human through the streets at dawn, chains locked around his wrists. The people stepped back in silence as he passed, but their eyes lingered. Some stared with pity, some with fear, and some with something sharper, hope. The boy had tried to follow, limping through the alleys, but the soldiers shoved him aside. Still, he shouted until his voice cracked, "Don't take him. He did nothing wrong." His cries were ignored, but they carried through the streets, and more heard the story. By the time the soldiers reached the Emperor's palace, the city already buzzed with tension. The palace loomed like a black mountain above the market, its walls carved from dark stone, its gates lined with banners of crimson and gold. At its heart sat the throne chamber, vast and cold, where the Emperor waited. The guards shoved the human through the towering doors. The sound of chains dragging across the polished floor echoed through the hall. The throne sat upon a high dais. Upon it the Emperor rested, a figure wrapped in robes of deep red, a crown of sharp metal circling his head. His face was pale and stern, eyes like black glass, unblinking and cold. The court bowed low as he raised one hand. Silence fell instantly. The lead guard spoke, his voice trembling slightly despite his armor. "My Emperor, this human, this outworlder, has broken your law. He gave aid to the weak. He defied your command." The Emperor's gaze fixed on the human. For a long moment he said nothing. The silence was heavier than chains. At last his voice rang out, slow and deliberate. "You, stranger, did you raise the broken one?" The human lifted his head. His wrists bore iron, but his eyes held no fear. "Yes," he answered. His voice was calm, clear. "I gave him a crutch so he could walk." A sharp hiss spread through the court. Ministers and nobles covered their mouths in shock. Some whispered prayers, as if even hearing such words could bring doom. The Emperor leaned forward. His eyes narrowed. "Do you know what crime you have committed?" The human shook his head slightly. "I do not see a crime in kindness." The words hung in the air like thunder. The nobles recoiled. Some gasped. One dropped his staff with a loud clatter. To speak of kindness here was dangerous, to call it no crime unthinkable. The Emperor's lips curved not in a smile but in a shadow of one. Cold, cruel. "Ignorant creature. In this empire, weakness is a chain. To raise the weak is to challenge my rule. To heal what is broken is to defy the will of the throne." The human's gaze did not waver. "Then your throne is built on cruelty." The court erupted. Shouts, gasps, the sound of robes sweeping across the floor as nobles staggered back. The guards tightened their grip on their spears. The Emperor raised his hand again, and silence slammed over the hall. His voice, low and cutting, carried to every ear. "No one has dared speak such words in my presence. You insult the throne. You insult the empire." The human's chains rattled as he shifted his stance, standing straighter. "I speak the truth." The child smiled. For the first time he smiled because he could walk. "Is that what you fear? A smile?" The chamber trembled with unease. Some in the crowd lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others clenched their jaws, torn between fear of the Emperor and agreement with the stranger's words. The Emperor's voice grew darker, sharper. "You mistake pity for strength. Your act is not mercy. It is poison. If the weak believe they can stand, they will rise. And if they rise, they will question. And if they question—" He leaned forward, eyes burning. "They will destroy the order that keeps them in chains." The human's reply came like steel. "Perhaps they should." The Emperor's robes rippled as he rose from his throne. For the first time, anger cracked through his mask of calm. "Enough! You will be an example. Tomorrow at dawn you will be executed before the gates. Let the city see the cost of defiance." The guards shoved the human to his knees. The court bowed, some in obedience, some in fear. Yet behind their lowered heads their eyes flickered. Some thought of the boy. Some thought of the smile. And some, though they dared not whisper, thought of rebellion. As the human was dragged away, chains clinking, he turned his head one last time to look at the throne. His eyes did not falter. His voice, calm and steady, carried across the chamber. Your empire is afraid of kindness. That is why it will fall. The emperor's hand clenched into a fist, and though the chamber returned to silence, the words did not fade. They sank into the hearts of all who heard, a seed waiting for fire. The child's secret night had fallen over Arcaris. The twin suns were gone, and the city lay under a dim red moon. The streets that once bustled with trade were now silent, broken only by the footsteps of patrols and the clang of their weapons. The human sat chained in a dark cell beneath the palace. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of stone and rust. The guards had left him in silence, but silence could not hide his thoughts. He replayed the emperor's words in his mind. Mercy is poison. Weakness must remain weakness. He closed his eyes, resting against the wall. For him it had been a small act, helping a child to walk. But for this empire it was rebellion. Then a faint scrape of stone broke the stillness. The human's eyes opened. From the corner of the cell, where shadows pooled, a small figure slipped through the bars of a drainage grate. It was the boy. He stumbled in, his crutch tapping against the ground, his face pale but determined. His silver eyes glimmered in the moonlight filtering through the grate. You shouldn't be here, the human whispered. The guards, they don't know, the boy cut him off. His voice shook, but his courage was clear. I had to see you. I had to tell you the truth. The human leaned forward, his chains clinking. The truth? The boy looked down at his crutch, then back at the human. You don't understand what you did. You think it was only kindness. But here, kindness is forbidden for a reason. He took a shaky breath. His hands gripped the wooden crutch so tightly his knuckles turned pale. Long ago, before I was born, this empire was different. People healed the weak. Families helped each other. Children like me were cared for. But then the emperor came. The boy's voice lowered, heavy with memory not his own, but passed down in whispers. The emperor said weakness is a disease. He said it spreads if left unchecked. So he made a law. No one may help the broken. The weak must remain low so the strong can rule above them. The human's jaw tightened. So he builds his power on suffering. The boy nodded. Yes, and if anyone shows mercy, it is seen as rebellion because mercy gives hope. Hope makes the broken believe they can rise. And if they rise, his voice trembled, they will one day topple the throne. The human leaned back slowly. Now he understood the stares, the whispers, the fear. The crutch was not just wood and cloth. It was a weapon, not against soldiers, but against despair. He looked at the boy carefully. Why risk coming here to tell me this? The boy's silver eyes glistened. Because you are the first one. The first in my life who looked at me and didn't turn away. The first who didn't pretend I wasn't there. The words struck deeper than chains. The human felt a weight in his chest, heavier than iron. The boy continued. I don't want you to die tomorrow. But if you must, I need you to know. You gave me more than a crutch. You gave me a chance to stand. And maybe you gave others something too. From outside, the sound of armored boots echoed. The boy froze, his body stiff with fear. The human motioned with his head. Go. If they find you here, they'll punish you too. The boy hesitated, tears forming at the edge of his eyes. I don't care. I don't want to lose the only one who ever helped me. The human's voice softened. Listen to me. You must live. Live and carry this hope with you. That's how kindness survives. The boy wiped his eyes roughly and nodded, but before slipping back toward the grate, he leaned close. His whisper was urgent, almost desperate. There are others, people who hide their mercy in secret. They will hear of you. They will talk of the man who gave the broken child a crutch. The emperor wants fear, but you gave them a story. Stories spread faster than fear. The human's eyes widened slightly. Others? The boy nodded once. Yes, tomorrow when they take you to the gates, remember this, you are not alone anymore. The sound of boots grew closer. The boy gasped and hurried to the grate. With effort, he pulled himself through, dragging the crutch behind him. Before disappearing into the shadows, he looked back one last time. Thank you, stranger. No matter what happens tomorrow, you have already changed everything. Then he was gone. The human sat in silence, his chains heavy but his heart lighter. He rested his head against the stone wall and let out a slow breath. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a symbol, though he had never asked to be one. Above, the red moon sank lower. The night deepened. And in the streets of Arcaris, quiet whispers moved from home to home, from ear to ear. The human helped the broken child. The human defied the emperor. The human gave hope. By dawn, the whispers would reach even the walls of the palace, and the emperor, in all his power, would learn what he feared most, that hope had returned. Chase through the city dawn broke over Arcaris with a heavy silence. The red light of morning poured over the city's black walls, casting long shadows. At the main gates, a wooden platform had been built overnight. Soldiers stood ready, their armor gleaming, their weapons sharp. The emperor had ordered an execution, and the city was forced to watch. But the cell where the human was kept was empty. The guards discovered it too late. The iron bars had been bent, not by strength, but by cleverness. A small grate was loose. The boy had left a trail of marks, and the human had followed. By the time the alarm rang, the human was already moving through the narrow streets of Arcaris. His chains were gone. His cloak was torn. His heart pounded not with fear, but with purpose. The boy's words from the night before echoed in his mind. There are others. You are not alone anymore. The city was alive now. Merchants opened stalls, children chased one another. Guards shouted warnings. Everywhere the story had already spread. People whispered as the human passed. There he is. The stranger who helped the child. Will he escape? But whispers turned quickly into shouts. Soldiers spotted him. The chase began. The human darted through the market, weaving between stalls of fruit and cloth. The sound of armored boots thundered behind him. Spears clattered against the ground as guards pushed through the crowd. Seize him, one bellowed. The human leapt over a cart, knocking over baskets of glowing fruit. The crowd scattered in panic, but not all turned away. Some stood frozen, watching, eyes wide, not at the guards, but at the man who dared to run. The boy limped quickly through an alley, trying to keep up. His crutch thudded against the stone. This way, he called. His voice was small but sharp, cutting through the chaos. The human turned, following him into the narrow shadows between buildings. The alley twisted like a maze. Clotheslines hung above, dripping water. Rats scattered as the two hurried through, but the guards were close. Their spears scraped against the walls. Their voices grew louder. Block the exits. Do not let him escape the city. The boy pulled the human into a doorway, hidden behind broken boards. They crouched in darkness, their breathing heavy. The footsteps of soldiers thundered past, shaking the ground. For a moment, silence. Then, a whisper. From the shadows deeper inside the room, another figure moved. An old woman with silver scales across her face stepped forward. Her eyes were sharp but not cruel. She carried a bundle of cloth. You are the human, she said softly, the one who helped the child. The human's hand moved to his side, ready for a fight if needed. Who are you? The woman shook her head. No enemy. We are many. We hide, we wait, we watch, and when mercy is shown, we protect it. She handed him the bundle. Inside lay a simple cloak, dark and plain, meant to hide him in the crowd. The boy's eyes lit up. I told you, he whispered. Others. The human nodded once, quickly wrapping the cloak around himself. But before he could thank her, shouts rang outside. The guards were circling back. The woman pressed a hand to his arm. Go, the city sees you now. Each step you take plants doubt in their hearts. That is the weapon the emperor cannot kill. The boy pulled at his cloak, urging him toward the back of the building. Together they slipped into another alley. Just as soldiers burst into the market behind them, the chase resumed. Through winding streets, across narrow bridges, down stairways carved into stone, the human ran. The boy struggled to keep up, but he never fell. His crutch struck the ground with fierce determination, echoing louder than the soldiers' boots. Crowds gathered as they passed. Some shouted warnings. Guards behind you! Others quietly moved carts, blocking the soldiers' path. A man spilled grain across the road, slowing their pursuit. The human saw it all, the small acts of defiance. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were actions, silent but clear. The chase led them higher toward the upper tiers of the city. From there, the palace loomed, black and sharp against the sky. Trumpets blared from its towers. The emperor's voice carried through speakers mounted on the walls. People of Arcaris, the human is a criminal. He threatens your safety. Do not help him. Obey the law or suffer his fate. But the words felt weaker now. The people's eyes were not only on the throne, they were on the man who ran with a child at his side. At last, the human and boy reached a cliff at the city's edge. Below stretched a river, wide and fast. Behind them, soldiers closed in, their spears raised. The boy gripped his crutch tighter, panting. "They'll catch us." The human's gaze moved to the water. Then he looked down at the child. His voice was steady. "Not if we jump." The boy's eyes widened in fear. "The river will kill us, or carry us to freedom," the soldiers shouted, drawing closer. The boy hesitated, torn between fear and trust. The human held out his hand. "Do you believe me?" The boy looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had bent down in the market, that had built a crutch with rough wood, that had seen him not as broken but as whole. Slowly, the boy placed his hand in his. Together they leapt. The river swallowed them whole. The soldiers rushed to the cliff's edge, but the current was too strong, the water too wide. The human and the child were gone, carried by the flow, and in the city above the whispers returned louder than ever. He escaped. The child escaped too. Kindness cannot be chained. The Emperor's judgment. The palace of Arcaris stood like a fortress against the morning sky. Its towers pierced the clouds, its black stone glistened with dew, and banners of crimson swayed in the cold wind. Yet inside the throne chamber the air was heavy. The Emperor sat upon his high seat, his crown sharp as thorns, his robes flowing like blood across the steps. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. He had not slept. All night reports had reached him, of a human who had escaped, of guards who failed, of whispers spreading through the city like fire. The nobles of the court stood in silence below, waiting for his voice. They shifted nervously, their jeweled collars clinking. Some dared not meet the Emperor's gaze. At last the Emperor rose. His voice carried through the chamber, low and commanding. "Bring me the human." The guards at the door hesitated. Their captain bowed deeply. "My Emperor, the human has fled. He leapt into the river. We searched, but his body was not found." The Emperor's hand clenched the arm of his throne until the stone cracked. "Not found," he repeated, his voice like ice. "Then he still lives." The chamber quivered. The nobles whispered in fear. "He defies the throne. He is only one man." "Yes, but one man who plants doubt." The Emperor turned sharply, his gaze sweeping across them. "Silence!" His voice roared like thunder. The whispers died instantly. He stepped forward, each stride echoing on the polished stone. "Do you know why mercy is forbidden? Because it is more dangerous than any blade. Mercy spreads. It weakens order, and now, a single act of pity has grown into rebellion." The nobles bowed their heads, but some of their eyes betrayed doubt. They had heard the same whispers in the city. They had seen the people's faces change. A minister, old and trembling, dared to speak. "My Emperor," the people murmur. "They say the human showed kindness." They wonder if perhaps he did not finish. The Emperor's hand shot out. With a flick of his fingers, the guards drove a spear through the old minister's chest. The man gasped once, then fell to the floor. The chamber fell silent again. No one moved. The Emperor's voice lowered, sharp as a blade. "Let this be clear. Mercy is treason. Question is treason. And anyone who dares speak in favor of the human will share his fate." The body was dragged away, leaving a smear of blood on the polished floor. The nobles kept their eyes fixed on the ground, but inside their hearts trembled. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, a small sound broke the silence. The click of wood on stone. The Emperor's gaze snapped to the side. A boy stood there, pale, limping, leaning on a wooden crutch. His silver eyes glowed like shards of moonlight. Gasps echoed through the court. How had the boy entered the throne room? Guards rushed forward, but the child raised his voice before they could seize him. "Stop!" The single word froze the chamber. The boy's gaze locked on the Emperor. "You call mercy poison, but mercy is life. He gave me a crutch and I walked. For the first time I walked." Is that rebellion, or is that hope? The nobles stirred, whispers rising again, uncontrolled this time. He dares speak. The child of the crutch. Hope. Yes, hope. The Emperor's eyes blazed with fury. "Silence him!" he roared. But when the guards moved, some nobles raised their hands, stopping them. Their voices shook, but they spoke aloud. Why silence a child? Why fear his words if they are weak? The Emperor's face darkened. He turned on them. "You forget yourselves." The human, still wet and battered from the river, stepped into the chamber then. His cloak clung to him, his eyes fierce. He had returned, not hiding but walking boldly into the heart of power. The court erupted in chaos. Some shouted in terror, others in awe. Guards raised their spears, but none dared strike. The Emperor's voice thundered. "You dare enter my hall again?" The human's chains were gone. His voice was steady. "I came not to fight. I came to speak truth. Your empire is built on fear, but fear is crumbling. You see it. You hear it. Even now your own court whispers." The Emperor raised his hand, but before he could give the order, the boy stepped forward, standing beside the human. His small frame trembled, but his voice rang clear. "We are not afraid anymore." The nobles gasped. The words spread through them like fire. Not afraid anymore. Some repeated them under their breath. Others lifted their heads, meeting the Emperor's gaze for the first time in years. The throne chamber was no longer silent. It trembled with voices, with questions, with the beginning of defiance. The Emperor's command had not crushed the rebellion. His judgment had fed it, and as the human and child stood together in the center of the hall, the Emperor realized the truth. The fall of his empire had already begun. The spark of rebellion, the throne chamber shook with voices. What had begun as whispers now roared like a storm. Nobles muttered to one another, their eyes no longer fixed on the floor. Some dared to lift their heads, others clenched their fists. The silence of fear was broken. The Emperor rose from his throne, his robes sweeping like fire. His voice cracked through the noise. "Enough, you will obey. You will kneel or you will die." But no one knelt. At the center of the hall, the human stood tall, water still dripping from his cloak, chains gone, eyes steady. Beside him, the boy leaned on his crutch, silver eyes burning with determination. They were only two figures, small against the vast empire, but together they held the room. The Emperor's face twisted with rage. "You dare defy me in my own court?" The human's reply was calm, each word carrying weight. "It was never about me. It was about them." He gestured to the nobles, to the guards, to the silent crowd beyond the chamber walls. "They fear you." But today they saw something greater than fear. They saw hope. The boy's voice rose, trembling but fierce. "He gave me a crutch and I walked. You call that rebellion. But to me it was freedom. If one child can stand, how many more will rise?" The chamber erupted. Ministers gasped, guards hesitated, and even the Emperor's closest advisors faltered. The Emperor's grip on their hearts had cracked. The Emperor roared, his crown glinting like a blade. "Seize them both! Strike them down!" But the guards froze. Their spears shook in their hands. Some looked at the boy, others at the human. Their orders were clear, but their hearts hesitated. One guard lowered his spear. Then another. The nobles saw it. The hesitation spread like fire through dry grass. In moments, the Emperor's command had turned into silence, defiance through stillness. The Emperor's eyes widened in fury. "Traitors, all of you." The human stepped forward, his voice low but unshaken. "No, not traitors. People. People who have remembered what you tried to erase." The boy placed his hand on the crutch and lifted it high. The simple wood caught the light, glowing like a torch in the shadows. "This is not a weapon," he said, his voice breaking but strong. "It is a gift of mercy, and mercy is stronger than fear." The chamber thundered with voices now, not whispers, not fear, but a chant. "Mercy is strength. Mercy is strength." The Emperor's fists trembled. He raised his hand to strike, to unleash the power of his throne, but the sound of the chant drowned him out. The palace itself seemed to tremble. The human's gaze met the Emperor's. "Your empire ends the day the people choose hope over fear. That day is today." The Emperor's scream shook the air, but no one listened. The guards turned away from him. The nobles raised their heads high. The boy stood beside the human, his crutch no longer a symbol of weakness but of rebellion. And outside the palace walls, the crowd gathered. They had heard the chant carried through the windows, carried through the voices of servants and guards. Thousands of voices rose as one. "Mercy is strength. Mercy is strength!" The Emperor's voice was drowned. His throne shook beneath him. His empire cracked not with swords but with belief. The boy turned to the human, his silver eyes filled with wonder. "You gave me a crutch, but you gave them all something greater." The human looked down at him, his face weary but steady. "I only did what was right." The boy smiled faintly. "Sometimes that is enough to change everything." The doors of the throne chamber burst open. The sound of the crowd outside poured in. A sea of voices, of faces, of hope that could not be chained. The emperor sank back into his throne, his crown heavy, his rage silent. For the first time he looked small, and at the heart of it all, a human and a child stood together, not as rulers, not as warriors, but as symbols of something the emperor could never destroy. The spark had been lit. The fire was coming. The story did not end in that hall. It was only the beginning.